Hey guys, it's Divine here from Merge.com. This week's video is about a topic that has been discussed since the Grand Exchange was introduced into the game about 6.5 years ago. Opinions about how the Grand Exchange updates are rather divided. Most people think the GE updates randomly and only trade volume matters. I'll show you why these two things are false, and I'll also talk about why it is useful to understand how the GE updates, when it updates, and how it does this. Nowadays it is much less important for the GE to update as it was when free trade still existed, because people did buyouts back then and they camped for rares, etc. Now despite that, it is still useful for you to know how this works. The GE price moving can influence people's decisions on merchanting a fair bit. An example of this is when an item is crashing for days and it keeps going for prices below the GE price. Then suddenly the GE updates and the GE price drops to below or around the current trade price. For many people, this is often a sign that it is time to rebuy. Now this is definitely not the only thing that causes rebounds, but it works as a confirmation for people. Here's an example for the Drygor Longsword. If you overlay these two graphs, you'll notice similarities for the most part, but a regular graph is not updated frequently enough and is limited to a maximum change of 5%. This causes problems when the price rises or crashes rapidly. It makes the graphs inaccurate, and thus people do not value them as much until they catch up with reality. Then they become a confirmation for a rebound for the majority of the players, even though a lot of merchants already predicted it and pre-stocked. So now that we know why it is still useful to understand how the GE updates, we can move on to when it does this. It is a common known fact that the GE updates once per day in Jagex time, which is GMT +1 in the summer and GMT during the winter. You can convert this to your own time zone using Google if you would like to. Now, did you also know that there is a 3.5 hour time frame in between 11:30 p.m. GMT and 3 a.m. GMT where the GE cannot update? This means that the prices can update at 11:24 p.m. and then again at 3:24 a.m. for example, which is 4 hours in between updates. On the other hand, there can also be over 40 hours in between two updates as well. Now most people think that these updates are completely random, which is false. There is no such thing as random encoding, which I'm pretty sure that is something that most coders can confirm. All random numbers are created by algorithms. If you can recreate this algorithm, then you can figure out the results of it yourself. A friend of mine decoded GE algorithm back in 2009. It took him a while as he needed enough data for it, but over time with a little help as well, he got there. This meant that he could predict when a GE would update within a 15-minute time frame. It was really invaluable information for camping rares to get street value, as you didn't have to sit behind your computer all day. It is no longer as important to know when exactly it updates though. Instead, there's still some value in understanding in what direction the next price move will be and if it will even update in the first place. Now to know if it will even update in the first place, we must understand what is required for it to update. Most people think that whether the price of an item will update or not is based on trade volume only. For example, a red party hat is a clearly stepped graph with always multiple days in a row where it doesn't update. The same goes for a random item with a low trade volume like Equaleaves. Now to back up this theory, if you look at items with an even lower trade volume like the Third Age Druidic Robe Top, you'll see only 3 price updates in over 2 years time. This is a pretty sad graph. Then on the other hand, a high volume item like the Amulet of Fury updates daily. It sounds logical to be only volume based, right? I agree, but there have been cases where items rose in price without even existing yet. All the offhand black items, for example. In between the release of the Evolution of Combat and June 2013, only the offhand Black Claw could be obtained by people who already owned Black Claws before the update. All the others were not in-game yet their price rose gradually for over half a year. Once they were actually released, their price started dropping pretty soon after. Now what is most interesting here is the offhand Black Longsword. Look at its graph here. Look how it rises in price almost every single day in the beginning, but less towards the end of the rise, without even existing thus far. The most logical conclusion here is that there were a lot more offers in for them in the beginning because it was kind of hyped and people wanted to see it for themselves. And a lot less offers later on as it got boring and the hype kind of went away. Now this is clear proof to me that the amount of offers like the amount of offers for an item in matters to a certain extent. Another example of this is Shark Soup. The item was added to the GE when player-owned ports were released, but the item itself never entered the game and it got removed later on as well. I sadly don't have an image of the graph anymore, but RSWiki still states the same. It rose from 1 GP to 470 GP without there ever being any volume whatsoever, which is kind of more proof that offers matter in some way. The same scenario applies to this thing called Thingy and to placeholder GFX, which were random items that never existed in game, but they still rose in Grand Exchange price. Despite this, the trade volume clearly remains the biggest factor. Now the big question is, how much needs to be traded for an item's GE price to update then? After 7 years, this question is still unknown for a simple reason. There isn't a whole lot of benefit to find it out anymore, and it costs a lot of effort. Others can also interfere with your testing without you knowing as well, and the required volume might be different for every item limit. I might test this again someday if I'd like to find out. If I do, I will share the results with you guys. Personally, I just wish that Jagex was a bit more transparent about a GE, but they're just not looking to give merchants even more power, unfortunately. The direction an item's GE price will move in is of course based on where the volume is traded at. It's just a matter of percentages. The more that is sold above the GE price, the more it will rise, and I don't think I'm telling anyone anything new here. If you're watching a market, you should be able to predict most of these updates. It's really not that difficult. You can watch it by staying in a price checking friend chat if they do your item, or you can manually price check your items a few times per day to check for bottoms and peaks and see where you think it'll end up. Now that's it for this week's video. I hope you learned something new. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments below. Take care guys, and good luck with your merchanting.